You have always been so selfish, Natalie. What about family loyalty? My father's voice, usually a low, comforting rumble, was a sharp crack across the polished mahogany of the holiday dinner table. His face, normally weathered and kind, was reddening, a storm gathering behind his eyes. The wine glass in his hand was gripped so tightly I feared it might shatter, sending shards of crystal and drops of blood-red Merlot across the pristine white tablecloth. It was a violent, jarring image that perfectly mirrored the chaos churning in my stomach. "I cannot believe you would refuse to help your own sister," my mother added, her voice a soft, disappointed sigh that cut deeper than any shout could. She shook her head, that familiar, practiced look of sorrowful disapproval settling onto her features. It was a look I had seen countless times throughout my life, a weapon she wielded with surgical precision, designed to inflict guilt and compel compliance. I sat there, stunned into silence, the festive scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon turning sour in the air. My carefully wrapped birthday gift to them, a beautiful, leather-bound photo album I had spent weeks curating, sat on the sideboard, barely acknowledged minutes earlier. Now, in a flash of rage, my father snatched it up. He didn't even look at it. He just stalked into the kitchen, the swinging door flapping behind him. A moment later, I heard the clatter of the trash can lid. He had tossed it, my gift, my effort, my love, unceremoniously into the kitchen trash. My name is Natalie Ruiz, and at 38 years old, I had spent my entire adult life being the responsible one. That single, cruel act of discarding my gift was the culmination of a lifetime of being their designated safety net, their emergency fund, their emotional and financial pillar. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Ruiz family had always meant one thing: responsibility. From a young age, I learned to be the dependable one, the steady hand, the voice of reason. While my younger sister, Vanessa, was encouraged to follow her passions and express herself freely, I was subtly guided toward pragmatism and sacrifice. "You're the sensible one, Natalie," my mother would say, as if it were the highest compliment, a crown of thorns I was expected to wear with a smile. What she really meant was that I could be counted on to clean up everyone else's messes. Our parents owned a small insurance agency in Pittsburgh. It provided a comfortable living, but never quite enough to fund both Vanessa's expensive tastes and their own aspirations for a more lavish lifestyle. Somehow, the shortfall always became my problem to solve. I put myself through college, working 2 jobs and subsisting on ramen noodles, diligently paying off every cent of my student loans 5 years ahead of schedule. While I was doing that, I was also sending money home for emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Vanessa's latest whim. When Vanessa needed money for art school in New York, a dream she pursued with reckless abandon, I delayed my own graduate studies to work extra hours, packing my own dreams away in a dusty box under my bed. I told myself it was what a good sister did. When she dropped out after 2 semesters to find herself in Europe, a trip that left her with nothing but a mountain of credit card debt, I was the one who covered it. I didn't want to see her credit ruined. I told myself it was a one-time thing. When our parents wanted to renovate their kitchen, a sleek, modern affair with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances they had seen in a magazine, I contributed a significant portion of my savings. I told myself it was a gift, a way of showing my gratitude. The pattern continued into adulthood. While I built my career as a financial analyst at Gravora Group, a prestigious firm downtown, carefully saving and investing, Vanessa bounced between creative endeavors that inevitably ended in financial disaster. First, it was the photography studio, complete with high-end equipment that ended up collecting dust in a rented space she could no longer afford. Then came the handcrafted jewelry line, which produced beautiful pieces but had no viable business plan. Finally, there was the boutique clothing store, the one that was now bleeding them dry. All of these ventures were funded with a mixture of my parents' dwindling savings and, of course, generous loans from me. Loans that were never spoken of again once the business collapsed. Yet somehow, in the family mythology, Vanessa was the brave dreamer, the artist, while I was just boring, reliable Natalie with her spreadsheets and her emergency fund. The one who always said yes. 7 years ago, when our parents decided to purchase their dream home, a sprawling Victorian in an upscale neighborhood they couldn't actually afford, they came to me. Their credit wasn't strong enough, their income not quite sufficient. They approached me with earnest expressions and those familiar, cloying appeals to family loyalty. "The bank needs a guarantor, Natty," my father had explained, sliding the paperwork across my modest kitchen table, a stark contrast to the grandeur of the house they were planning to buy. "Just a formality, really. We'll make every payment, you know that." I had hesitated then, a knot of unease tightening in my chest. I sensed the weight of the commitment, the long shadow it would cast over my own financial future. But ultimately, I signed. After all, they were my parents. They had raised me, supported me in their way, and they promised, with tears in my mother's eyes, that this would be the last time they needed my help. It wasn't. Each year brought new emergencies that required my financial intervention, and each time I told myself it would be the final time. Each time I was wrong. The breaking point came gradually, then suddenly, like bankruptcy as Hemingway might say. Small resentments accumulated, the forgotten birthdays, the dismissive comments about my career, the way they celebrated Vanessa's smallest achievements while taking my stability for granted. But I never expected the holiday dinner to become the final straw. The request from my parents had been breathtaking in its audacity: sell my home. The one thing I had worked tirelessly to achieve on my own, to bail out Vanessa's failed boutique, her third failed business in 5 years. When I gently but firmly declined, explaining that I couldn't sacrifice my own financial security, I became the villain of the family narrative once again. Somehow, standing up for myself made me ungrateful in their eyes. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. The mortgage papers for my parents' house bore my signature as guarantor, a fact they conveniently overlooked whenever they criticized my life choices. Perhaps some part of Vanessa recognized the injustice of the situation, because she remained silent as our parents continued their barrage. I noticed she couldn't meet my eyes. The tension in the room was suffocating, weighing down on my shoulders like an invisible boulder. Years of similar moments flashed through my mind, always being expected to sacrifice while Vanessa was coddled, always being the emergency fund while she pursued her dreams without consequence. Something inside me shifted. The familiar urge to apologize, to acquiesce just to keep the peace, evaporated. In its place, a calm resolve took hold. I knew what I needed to do, what I should have done long ago. I excused myself quietly from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor as I stood. "Where are you going?" my mother called after me, her tone suggesting I was committing yet another offense by leaving. "To my car," I replied simply, my voice steady. "I'll be right back." As soon as the front door closed behind me, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but my purpose was clear. I scrolled to a number I rarely used. My cousin Elena, a successful attorney who had always seen through my parents' manipulation. We had grown distant over the years, largely because my parents disapproved of her confrontational nature, which was really just her refusal to tolerate their behavior. "Natalie," she answered, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No," I admitted, the word a heavy weight lifted from my chest. "But I'm hoping you can help me make it right." Over the next hour, sitting in the cold darkness of my car while the hollow sounds of my family's laughter drifted from the house, I explained everything. The mortgage, the holiday dinner, the attempted manipulation, and now the false accusations and Jason's involvement. Elena listened without interruption, and when I finished, her response was immediate and decisive. "Send me everything you have, Natalie. And Natalie, it's about time you stood up to them." With Elena on board, I felt more confident in my position. But I also knew my parents and sister wouldn't back down easily. They had built their entire worldview around my compliance, and my rebellion threatened that foundation. The following day, a package arrived at my office. Inside was the birthday gift my father had thrown away, the custom-bound collection of family photographs I had carefully curated and restored. Attached was a note in my mother's handwriting. "We're still family. Don't do this to us." The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. To return the discarded gift as if it had never been thrown away, appealing to family bonds while simultaneously threatening me with false legal accusations. I placed the book on my shelf without opening it and texted Elena. "They're escalating. What's our next move?" Her response was immediate. "We call their bluff." 2 days later, Elena and I walked into the sleek, intimidating offices of Aspen Capital Partners for a meeting with my parents, Jason Wilson, and the firm's representatives. The conference room was tense with anticipation as we took our seats across from my family. Jason looked older than I remembered. The boyish charm that had once captivated me was now hardened into something calculating and weary. He barely met my eyes as he shuffled through his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the situation he'd been drawn into. My father sat rigidly in his chair, jaw clenched in defiance. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the perfect picture of maternal distress. Vanessa had chosen not to attend, sending a text that morning claiming she didn't want to be in the middle, as if she hadn't been a central figure in this drama from the beginning. Dominic Weber, a senior partner at Aspen Capital, opened the meeting. "We're here to address the allegations regarding the mortgage agreement for the property at 742 Highland Avenue, currently owned by Gerald and Patricia Ruiz, with Natalie Ruiz as guarantor." My father leaned forward, his voice thick with feigned outrage. "My daughter forged our signatures and is now trying to force us out of our home. It's elder abuse, plain and simple." I remained silent, letting Elena take the lead as we had discussed. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Ruiz," she said calmly, her voice echoing in the quiet room. "One that could have significant legal consequences for the accuser if proven false." She opened her laptop and turned it toward the room. "I have here the video recording of the original mortgage signing, taken by the notary public as part of their standard practice." The video began to play, clearly showing my parents signing the documents, expressing gratitude for my help, and promising this would be the last time they needed my financial assistance. Additionally, Elena continued as the video ended, "I have statements from the notary and the bank representative present that day, confirming the signatures were made willingly and with full understanding of the terms." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "These could be doctored or taken out of context." "They're certified copies, Mr. Wilson," Elena interrupted, her tone sharp. "And we have the originals secured with timestamps and authentication. But perhaps more relevant to your client's concerns is this." She slid a document across the table. It was a full, itemized accounting of all the financial assistance I had provided to the Ruiz family over the past 15 years. Loans never repaid, investments in Vanessa's businesses with no return, contributions to household expenses, and various emergencies. The total comes to approximately $387,000, Elena stated, not including the mortgage guarantee. My mother gasped. "That's absurd. We never." "Every transaction is documented," Elena said firmly. "Bank transfers, checks, credit card statements. Natalie has kept meticulous records." The room fell silent as the magnitude of what they owed me, financially and morally, sank in. Dominic Weber cleared his throat. "In light of this information, does your client wish to maintain their allegations of forgery, Mr. Wilson?" Jason looked at my father, who seemed suddenly deflated, the righteous anger replaced by a pale shock. "We'll need to confer privately." They were given a smaller meeting room, and while they were gone, Dominic turned to me. "Miss Ruiz, may I ask why you maintained this arrangement for so long?" I considered the question carefully. "They're my family. I always believed that eventually they would recognize the imbalance and want to make things right. I was wrong." When my parents and Jason returned, the change in their demeanor was striking. My father's defiance had crumbled, replaced by a calculating pragmatism. My mother's theatrical emotions had been replaced by a careful restraint. "We're prepared to withdraw our allegations," Jason announced, "and to discuss refinancing options for the mortgage." Elena nodded. "That's a start. But there are additional terms my client requires before we can move forward." As she outlined my conditions, a formal acknowledgement of the debt they owed me, a legally binding agreement to cease all financial demands, and a commitment to family counseling, I saw something I had never witnessed before: my parents listening, truly listening, to my needs. It wasn't quite victory, but it was the beginning of something new. 3 months after the meeting at Aspen Capital, I sat across from my family at a restaurant chosen for its neutral territory. This wasn't a celebration or a reconciliation. It was a reckoning. My parents had sold their dream house. The Victorian that had been the physical manifestation of their entitlement now belonged to another family. They had downsized to a comfortable condo that better suited their actual financial situation and used the remaining equity to partly address their debt to me. They looked different, somehow smaller, less imposing. "And we've been talking to Vanessa about her spending habits," my mother added, her voice quiet. "She's agreed to meet with a counselor, too." Vanessa, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, looked up from her menu. "I've taken a job at Gravenhaus Freight," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "In their marketing department. It's entry-level, but it's steady." The surprise must have shown on my face because she quickly added, "I know it's not as exciting as running my own boutique, but after looking at the numbers, really looking at them, I realized I was never as close to success as I thought." It was perhaps the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. Not an apology, not quite, but an acknowledgement of reality that had been sorely lacking in our family dynamic. "That sounds like a good opportunity," I said, meaning it. "Their marketing team has a strong reputation." A tentative smile crossed her face. Not the dazzling, manipulative charm she usually employed, but something more genuine. "Thanks. I'm trying." The changes in my family didn't happen overnight, and they weren't without setbacks. There were still tense phone calls, still moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally hinted at financial emergencies that turned out to be wants rather than needs. My father still struggled with seeing me as an autonomous adult rather than an extension of their financial resources. But the difference was that now there were consequences for crossing my boundaries. When they pushed too hard, I would simply end the conversation and enforce a cooling-off period. No drama, no arguments, just consistent reinforcement that the old dynamics were no longer acceptable. Elena remained a steady presence in my life, helping me navigate the complex emotions of reconstructing my family relationships on healthier terms. "It's like rehabilitation after an injury," she said during one of our regular lunch meetings. "There will be pain, there will be resistance, but if you stick with the program, eventually there's healing." At work, the changes in my personal life translated to professional growth. Freed from the constant drain on my emotional and financial resources, I found myself taking risks I would have previously avoided. I applied for a senior position that opened up at Gravora Group and was selected from a competitive field of candidates. "Your presentation showed a confidence we haven't seen from you before," my new director told me after the announcement. "Whatever changed in the past few months, it suits you." What had changed was fundamental. I had reclaimed my power, my resources, and my right to prioritize my own well-being. The weight I had carried for so long hadn't just been financial. It had been the crushing burden of being needed but never valued, of giving without receiving, of love conditioned on sacrifice. The most surprising revelation came from Vanessa during a coffee meeting, just the two of us. "You know, I resented you for years," she admitted, stirring her drink absently. "You always seemed so perfect, so together. I felt like I could never measure up." I almost laughed at the irony. While I was resenting you for getting all the support and encouragement I never received. She looked genuinely shocked.
"What?"
"But they were always bragging about you, their successful daughter with a corporate job and the nice house." "To others, maybe," I said. "Never to me." That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. Not an instant transformation into the close sisters we had never been, but the beginning of an honest dialogue that held the potential for something authentic. As for my parents, they were learning. Slowly, reluctantly, they were learning that respect was a prerequisite for a relationship with me, not an optional extra. As I drove home from our latest family meeting, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't in watching my parents downsize or seeing my sister take a conventional job. It was in the knowledge that regardless of what happened with them going forward, I was finally free. Free to build the life I wanted on my terms, without guilt or obligation weighing me down. In seeking justice, I had found something far more valuable: peace.